Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to our program on Kardec Radio. And now, here's our host, Dr. Vanessa Anceloni.
Welcome, dear listener, to Kardec Radio. We are here in this beautiful day to celebrate a life well lived. It's about Chico Xavier, the medium of the century. And what about the medium of the century that actually changed many lives? This is beyond profiting from the messages of the beyond, of turning mediumship into a profession. No, it's way beyond it. It's not terrestrial at all. It's an angelic form of using mediumship. You will get to know more about Chico Xavier today by listening to the very author of the book, Chico Xavier, Medium of the Century, Guy Leon Playfair, a British author who wrote the book about Chico Xavier. Why has he written the book? Why he decided to define Chico Xavier as the medium of the century, or of all centuries. We're going to listen to this and much more in the program today. And before we do so, we would like to share with you that Kardec Radio has a challenge for you. And in 2 weeks, we're going to bring to the program the winner of the contest of Kardec Radio Challenge. It's all about your intake. On Kardec's comments in the Spirit's book, when he talks about the law of justice, charity, and love, he talks about the fact that desiring for others what we desire for ourselves is different than desiring for ourselves what we desire for others. It may sound very simplistic, but actually it is a statement of deep knowledge inside of ourselves. How about you sharing your take on the difference between these two sentences according to Kardec's statement? Share this with us. Go to KardecRadio.com, our website, or send an email to KardecRadio@gmail.com or Kardec@KardecRadio.com and share your view on this. The person who will be selected by a committee by Kardec Radio will come to the program at the end of this month to share with us their understanding on the difference that Kardec mentioned. It's quite important, and it's all to do with what we're going to talk about today, this feeling of being charitable, at service. And you know, there are spiritist centers around the world for you to practice your mediumship and to learn more about spiritism. All you need to do is to go to the website of the International Spiritist Council, intersay.com, and find out in your location the people who are responsible for spiritist centers. In the United States, you can go to spiritist.us, the United States Spiritist Council's website, and a list of the affiliated members, the Spiritist centers that are members of the United States Spiritist Council will be there for you. Not only that, but we would like also to share with you that if you are in England, you can go to the British Union of Spiritist Society's website and get to know more about centers in your area. Or in Canada, the Canadian Spiritist Council.org has a website that is quite useful as well, with information about centers over there. And if you log in at our chat room, we're here awaiting your comments or questions throughout the show. And you can call us at 858-769-4705. Yes, we can almost feel you want more. You want to know more about Chico Xavier. You may be puzzled if you don't know Chico. Why was he the medium of the century? Guy Leon Playfair is going to be here with us sharing about it. And in the meantime, we're going to share with you that mediumship is all about service. If we go to the Spirit's book, in the Prolegomena, a group of very illuminated spirits said to the mediums at Kardec's time, remember that good spirits only aid those who serve God with humility and lack of self-interest. They repudiate anyone who uses the way of heaven as a stepping stone to earthly things, and they withdraw from the proud and ambitious. Pride and ambition will always be barriers between human beings and God. They are a veil thrown over the celestial splendors, and God cannot use the blind to explain the light. This is a message that came through several mediums at Kardec's time, and you can read it in the Prolegomena, the beginning pages of the Spirit's Book, edition of the International Spiritist Council. There we get to know one of the reasons why Chico Xavier was the medium of the century. He was essentially humble, and not only that, but as Mentor Joseph explains to us, here's a list of 10 essential points that made Chico Xavier be such a medium with a balanced mediumship. So let's say Mentor Joseph is giving to us the 10 essential points for balanced mediumship. Number 1, keep in mind that you're a medium, meaning an instrument. An instrument is always ready to be useful and serve. 2, refine yourself as an instrument of illuminated minds by studying the Spiritist teachings all the more. This will give you a sense of humility. 3, get to know of yourself. Mediumship is a mind-to-mind process. Inner transformation then becomes imperative. 4, transform any form of personal interest by merging it into the interest of general goodness. 5, prayer and conscious relationship with your spirit guide are keys for indispensable guidance. Be ready for greater discipline always. 6, practice mediumship in a teamwork fashion in a spiritist center that is well guided. Number 7, never charge for any mediumistic service. Mediumship is not a profession. 8, always consult with more experienced spiritists before publishing or publicizing any mediumistic material. 9, the misuse of mediumship can incur in suspicion of it for your own benefit. And number 10, remember, the accomplished medium is the one that fulfills the law of charity. Dear listener, these are Mentor Joseph's intake in regard to the life that became a legacy. Chico Xavier followed these 10 points quite successfully and left us the following message. We can also do the same. It's all a matter of being a service. Talking about service, we now leave you here with the opening prayer by Emmanuel, the prayer of service. Let us listen to it, get enlightened. After the break, we will be back with the author of the book, Chico Xavier, Medium of the Century, Guy Leon Playfair.
Prayer of Service. Lord, teach us to walk the enlightening path of service. Give us the strength to destroy the heavy fortress of our wrongdoings, the courage to pave the way to freedom from ourselves, and the means to unlock our hearts in favor of our neighbors, surrendering to them at last the treasures of love with which you entrusted us. Wherever we walk, may pain become less hurtful, ignorance less aggressive, hatred less cruel, darkness less dense, lethargy less shadowing, intolerance less destructive. If we do not yet possess the positive qualities to enrich our terrestrial journey, help us to mitigate the injustices that surround us. May we, in your name, distribute fraternity and renewal, and use with happiness the sublime and invisible gifts of silence, comprehension, and renunciation. Lord, who taught us without words the supreme lessons of simplicity in the cradle and of sacrifice in the cross, leading us toward spiritual development and divine resurrection, guide our uncertain walk and help our sanctified propositions, so that your will, merciful and just, be unto us, with us, and for us, today and forever, wherever we may be. So be it.
We will return to our program after these messages.
Kardec Radio, live, every Saturday at 11 a.m.
Nourish your soul with Kardec Radio.
Now available for purchase, the book Chico Xavier, Medium of the Century by Guy Léon Playfair. This is the first biographical and critical study in English of one of the outstanding mediums of all time, through whom more than 450 books were received by automatic writing over a 70-year period, few of which, until recently, were available in English translations. Purchase your copy today at www.roundtablepublishing-uk.com. www.roundtablepublishing-uk.com.
The newest edition of the Medium's book by Allan Kardec is now available. Purchase your copy online or via your ebook reader. Simply go to www.ediciofamerica.com today.
Nourish your soul with Kardec Radio.
Join us every Thursday live. Evolution in Two Worlds. A journey of the soul through the teachings of the Spirit Doctor, Andrea Luiz. Connect at www.tvcei.com, Channel 2.
And now we return to our program.
Dear listener, we are here live and we're talking about Chico Xavier, the medium of the century. We have the honor to have with us the author of the book, Chico Xavier, Medium of the Century, Guy Léon Playfair. In Guy Léon Playfair's own words, Chico Xavier was born on April 2nd, 1910, in the town of Pedro Leopoldo, Brazil, where he lived until December 1958, when he moved to Uberaba in the state of Minas Gerais, Brazil. He worked unceasingly as a medium and became known as the most devoted worker in the spiritist field in the area of mediumistic activity, in addition to his devotion to the social and spiritual assistance and evolution of the human being. His psychographic production entailed 412 books, 87 of which have been published by the Brazilian Spiritist Federation. On account of his devotion to the free assistance of those in need, Chico Xavier was paid homage countless times, both by the general public and by public agencies, and was awarded the title the Minas Citizen of the 20th century in the year 2000 as a result of a poll taken in that state. He was also nominated by more than 10 million people in 1981 for the Nobel Peace Prize. Chico discarnated on June 30, 2002, leaving behind an exemplary life of love for his fellow beings. And the author of this amazing book, Chico Xavier, Medium of the Century, is Guy Léon Playfair, who was born in India and educated in England. After graduating from Cambridge University, he moved to Brazil, where he worked as a freelance journalist for The Economist, Time, and the Associated Press, also spending 4 years in the press section of the U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID. In his first 2 books, The Flying Cow and The Infinite Boundary, he described his investigations of such unusual phenomena as poltergeist, psychic surgery, and reincarnation as a member of the research institute founded by Brazil's pioneer parapsychologist, Dr. Hernani Guimarães Andrade. He also described his meeting with Chico Xavier in 1973 that led to the first detailed account of the medium's life and work to appear in English, which has been expanded and updated in the present book. His most recent book is Twin Telepathy, and he now lives in London and is a council member of the Society for Psychical Research and a great collaborator of the Spiritist movement in England. He has been helping especially the leadership of Elsa Rossi in the Round Table Publishing Company. So here we have the honor to have the author of the book Chico Xavier, Medium of the Century, Guy Leon Playfair. Hi, Guy. Can you tell us why specifically you have decided to write about Chico Xavier?
Well, I didn't actually decide to write only about him. I was living in Brazil in the 1970s, and I had the opportunity from an English publisher to do a book about all the kind of strange phenomena happening in Brazil, like the psychic surgeons and the mediums and reincarnation, poltergeists especially, which I'm specialized in those. And obviously I heard about Chico, and finally I got a chance to meet him when I moved to Sao Paulo. Mm-hmm. I went to one of his book signings, which was an extraordinary event. It was right across the road from the Volkswagen factory in São Bernardo do Campo. Mm-hmm. I think it's the largest car factory in South America. Mm-hmm. And right across the street here was Chico, a kind of one-man book factory. I mean, I think he sold 2,000 copies in one day. I wish I could be so lucky. And I was introduced to him, and he was extremely charming, and gave me a copy of one of his books, Parnasso de Aventura, which I frequently read. And I was enormously impressed. I mean, here was somebody spending the whole day. He didn't leave until late in the evening. And, of course, he didn't receive any payment. He never received payment for anything except his state pension from the Ministry of Agriculture. So I think he was really, if anybody deserved the Nobel Peace Prize, he certainly did, and he should have got it, in my opinion.
Yeah, you said the first impression was he was charming, and would you say, as people describe, humble as well, very simple? Yeah,
absolutely. No trace of kind of big celebrity showing off and so on. So very, very genuine. And he asked me to give his best wishes to the editor of the Psychic News, who he had met before, and he was just very, very warm and genuine, and a fascinating individual, and I think one of definitely the outstanding medium of the century, if not of all centuries.
But why specifically you think he was the medium of the century, of all the centuries? I mean, why? Going from being very kind and gentle and humble and simple to being the best medium of all times? Well,
simply to be materialistic about it. I mean, think of all the money that he gave away. Mm-hmm. I mean, Mother Teresa was given the Nobel Prize, and I'm sure she did wonderful work, and she's said to have benefited about 30 institutions. Well, Chico benefited about 2,000. I mean, come on, let's have some realism here. But of course, they don't like the Nobel Prize would not like to be associated with a spiritist medium. Catholic nuns are okay, but not spiritist mediums. That's how it is.
Yeah, not yet. Since you were there and you got to know him, then you more frequently planned on visiting him and getting to know more about his work, right?
Well, I would like to have, but it was really not easy because Uberaba is quite a long way from Sao Paulo.
Yeah.
And I could only catch him when he was in town, because I had work in Sao Paulo. And then I returned to England and lost touch with just about everything in Brazil. So I didn't have the chance, but I would like to have written more about him because, as I say, he was a very unusual, exceptionally gifted medium and a wonderful philanthropist.
Mm-hmm. Were you impressed when you kept reading and researching a little bit more about the scope of his work? Because some people, when I tell them, look, Chico Xavier was not only a writing medium, he had so many different types of mediumship. Would your way of phrasing, like Chico, medium of the century, also include the fact that he was an extraordinary medium with different types of mediumship as well?
Yes, certainly. I mean, several people I know who met him told me that Chico seemed to know all about them before they'd even been introduced. I mean, there was one, Hernani Guimarães Andrade, with whom I had the pleasure of working in Sao Paulo. The first time he met Chico, Chico used his name that only his mother had called him when he was a child.
Wow.
He called him Naniku. Nobody I never heard that, and Annie said that he had not heard it since his early childhood, and yet Chico just came up with it. He did that again with Janet Duncan, who is a British woman who lived many years in Sao Paulo. She was taken to visit Chico, mm-hmm. and she found he'd already written her name on his special list for prayers, and her real name is actually not Janet, it is Jeanne Annette, which is rather complicated, and she found it much simpler to call herself Janet mm-hmm. in Brazil, and Chico had written her full name, which she'd never told him. How did he know that? I mean, it's not even in her handbag if he'd been looking through that beforehand, and it's just not possible. Mm. And another friend, well, Elsa Rossi, whom you know, she told me that the first time she met Chico, she had not even been introduced by name, mm-hmm. and she looks completely Brazilian. She doesn't look like an English woman at all. And Chico just casually said, "Oh, give my regards to Maurice Bovenel in London." He didn't know that she was going to London, which she was, and still is here. So, I mean, Chico would come out with the most extraordinary, unexpected comments about people's names and their private life, and I was slightly nervous about what he might say about me, but he didn't actually say anything except to remember him to the editor of the Psychic News. So I did that. But yes, he was truly extraordinary.
And Guy, the thing is this, many people also talk about healings that he performed. Like, for example, Divaldo Franco, we have his videotaped account on how he was healed by the entities through Chico Xavier of a throat cancer. You've heard of similar stories as well?
Yes, I met Divaldo when he came to London a couple of years ago, and I'd met him earlier on at a conference where I'd done some translation for him. And yes, he's certainly another exceptionally interesting medium, and he's had some very intriguing experiences himself with buildings in Europe where he felt that he'd lived before and had memories from previous lives. But Chico was such a very modest, humble man. He would never show off. He would just come out with these remarks as if they were perfectly natural for him to know all about you.
Mm-hmm.
But he never made a big deal out of it, and he could have become a TV star and probably a millionaire, but he just didn't want that sort of thing, and his whole life was devoted to helping others. I think we need a lot more people like him.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing. You know, we could go back and forth, and I would like, just to quote an excerpt of your book. I would tell the following to the listeners as well. For spiritists and non-spiritists, your book is worth a deep study because you don't only talk about Chico, but you give details. It's beyond opinion. It's about fact, and you get the input of people who are also very reliable, like Dr. Nobry, Janet Duncan, Elsa Rossi, and as you said, even your contact with, in collaboration with Dr. Nani Guimarães and others. And I would like to just spend a little more time highlighting, for example, things that, many people, Guy, probably better than all of us, that how many mediums, they profit so much from it, thinking that it's a profession. And Chico Xavier himself, as you say on page 93 of the edition that I have in my hand, you say a full audit of the money concerned would keep a team of accountants busy for some time. And here, for example, is a list of what was handed out on just one day to a total of 11,765 people at just one of the estimated 2,000 centers that receive funds from those royalties. And I will quote just the math that you do here, just so people think about it. 8,337 items of clothing, 993 pairs of shoes, 311 sets of baby clothes, 1,926 toys, 4,320 pencils, 500 books, 335 bags of rice, 218 kilos of sweets, and 11,815 sandwiches. And this is just on a daily basis. And then, as you said, he donated all the proceeds of his mediumistic work to everybody else. And I remember when his father cornered him when he was at the very beginning, saying, look, because they were from very simple and humble conditions. And the father said, come on, can't you channel some of this money so we can survive here? And he said, Dad, you really don't know what you're talking about. Were you impressed by that as well?
Well, that's typical of Chico. He just wouldn't accept payment because he always frequently said, it's not my work. It's work that's given to me, and it's not mine, so I have no right to receive any money for it. I'm just a cavallo. I'm just literally, I'm just a medium.
Yeah.
He would not accept any credit for any of the money that he made by his books, and that was obviously very important to him because he liked. He was very fond of music. He had a little record player, and I'm sure he would have liked to have bought more discs and tapes and things. But somebody once gave him a grand piano, which he immediately gave away, and that's just how he was.
Mm-hmm. The other day, we were talking about mediumship at the beginning of this year, and we were discussing on Kardec Radio with our dear Jose Musi from Canada. We're talking about demystifying mediumship, and we mentioned the fact that nowadays, even in Spiritism, people who are mediums of some books, they come and say, oh, this is my book, this is my book. And I said, I've never heard Chico saying, this is my book. He always said, these books are not mine. They are actually of the spirit authors. Mm. There's quite a difference there to the attitude as well, right?
Yes, absolutely. It's rather sad, really, that a lot of mediums, certainly in England and in the United States, have become television stars. And just recently there was an allegation of fraud, which I think was probably true. Mm-hmm. A medium who pretended to get information about somebody in the audience, which in fact she'd asked on the way in, asked to fill in a questionnaire, and she simply was playing back what she already knew. So that was not mediumship at all. That was fraud. It is very sad, but there are many people who really can live like Chico. I mean, he did have a job. He worked at the what was it called? A kind of fazenda model farm in Minas Gerais, where he lived, and he had quite a responsible job. I think he was a bookkeeper, and when he retired, he got a pension, which was enough to live on in this very modest little house, and just all of his time was taken up with either with writing or with running these enormous distributions of food and clothing to the poor people in Uberaba. So he was really a full-time worker for what he considered to be his mission.
Guy, we're going to give a short break and be right back with you because we have lots of more questions from listeners that they have sent to us.
We will return to our program after these messages.
Kardec Radio, live, every Saturday at 11 a.m.
Nourish your soul with Kardec Radio.
Now available for purchase, the book Chico Xavier, Medium of the Century by Guy Léon Playfair. This is the first biographical and critical study in English of one of the outstanding mediums of all time, through whom more than 450 books were received by automatic writing over a 70-year period, few of which until recently were available in English translations. Purchase your copy today at www.roundtablepublishing-uk.com www.roundtablepublishing-uk.com.
The newest edition of the Medium's book by Allan Kardec is now available. Purchase your copy online or via your ebook reader. Simply go to www.ediciofamerica.com today.
Nourish your soul with Kardec Radio.
Join us every Thursday live, Evolution in Two Worlds, a journey of the soul through the teachings of the Spirit Doctor, Andrea Luiz. Connect at www.tvcei.com, Channel 2.
Nourish your soul with Kardec Radio.
Spiritism for Everyone, the online study of the Spirit's Book and the Gospel according to Spiritism. Spiritism for Everyone meets every Wednesday evening and Saturday morning using the latest technology in web conferencing. You can join in from any computer in the comfort of your home or office, no matter where you are in the U.S. or the world. Spiritism for Everyone is open, free, and requires no registration. To access the web live meetings, go to www.spiritus.us. Spiritism for Everyone is a program of the United States Spiritist Council.
And now we return to our program.
So we are here with Guy Léon Playfair, the amazing author of this book, Chico Xavier, Medium of the Century. And it's a book not only for those who have never been acquainted with Chico Xavier and want to know more, but to very many people who are actual spiritists and scholars who really want to know, a different perspective, and not only different in the sense that it's not matching the reality, but it goes deeper in detail. And here, for example, at the Spirit Society of Baltimore in the United States, we have been coordinating the translation of one of his most difficult books, Evolution in Two Worlds. And there you can tell the one of the features of his mediumship and the variety of styles in which the spirits brought messages through him. Were you impressed, and how so, in regard to the variety of styles and themes that was brought to him?
Well, you only have to look at the poems in Parnassus from Beyond the Grave. Hundreds of them by just about every great Brazilian Portuguese poet that ever existed. And these have been studied very, very carefully by literary critics. And their opinions are included in the editions of the book. And there's absolutely no doubt at all that they all agree that the poems, say, written by Chico, attributed to Augusto dos Anjos, they have all the characteristics of Augusto's style. And there is even one poem which is a kind of continuation of one that he wrote when he was alive. And considering that Chico hardly had any education at all, I mean, he dropped out of school when he was, I think, 14, and he had a serious eye problem, so he really didn't read very much, if at all. And even if he had a degree in Portuguese language, he just could not have imitated all these poets, some of whom are really quite obscure and not well known at all. It's just not possible.
And it's amazing because, for example, specifically on this book, Evolution into Worlds, André Luiz, through Chico Xavier, brings prophetic, it's almost like a prophecy, scientific prophecy about, for example, the division of matter. And as a neuroscientist myself, I was so surprised to observe that in chapter 9, when they talk about the brain evolution, they revealed in 1958 that the neurons can be born and reborn again in the physical and spiritual body. And I'm like, wow, this was first revealed in a scientific paper in 2002. In 1958, neuroscience was not even considered a science per se. It was still in the realm of biological sciences. So it's quite impressive, right?
Well, he also predicted that the electron was a dissociable particle, which was also at about 1950-something, long before anybody had heard of neutrinos or quarks or gluons or muons or whatever. And he was right.
Dr. Nobre from the International Spiritist Medical Association and also the Brazilian one, she often says, if the scientists know of it, they pay attention to what they say in this book, we can probably create great protocols in science and really expedite a lot of what science, awaits verification, right?
Yes, I've met Dr. Mullaney, and she's been over here a couple of times and given a very interesting talk. And of course, she understands the scientific side as well as the mediumistic side, because she attended numerous sessions with Chico Xavier and knows him very well. And I think it's largely thanks to them that there is a considerable revival now in Brazil of conventional doctors collaborating with spiritist centers in treatment, especially of psychosomatic diseases. And this seems to be a very fortunate, very good collaboration and very, very welcome.
Yes, you're right. And of all the books that you've become acquainted and came through the mediumship of Chico Xavier, was there one in particular that called more of your attention, and why?
Well, it's very hard to say that. I think, well, there's no doubt that the poems in Parnasso are the most impressive from the literary point of view. I'm particularly fond of this novel called La Vida Continua, Life Goes On.
Yeah.
Because it's so incredibly complicated. I mean, even Tolstoy couldn't have done a more intricate story where relationships between characters get more and more entangled.
It's almost like a Hollywood movie, right?
Well, it could be. I think it would make a very good Hollywood movie.
Yeah.
And it's well written and it's easy to read. And it's just a good story. And, well, again, considering having seen the films of the way he would just sit down and put his hand over his eyes, and his right hand would go as if it was driven by a battery. I mean, at terrific speed, really faster than you would have thought possible. That's not the way I write. I mean, it takes me much longer to write a sentence than it took him. So I'm extremely impressed by his methods and, in fact, by everything about him.
Would you say that he was very easy on team working? Because some people, as you're saying, the medium of the century, would also, one of the features of this include the fact that different from many mediums who are quite, solitary and exclusive, and they don't know how to teamwork because of jealousy and envy, etc. He was totally the opposite, right? He was more like engaging and working with people all the time.
Yes, he collaborated on many books with Xavier, and unfortunately, Vieira went away from the movement, but with the books that they did, like Evolution in Two Worlds, were a good example of collaboration. And of course, all of his poems were collaborations with deceased authors. So yes, he never claimed to do anything original himself. It was all given through him.
We're going to give a short break and be right back with you with a few questions from our listeners who have sent us by email.
Okay.
We will return to our program after these messages.
Available for purchase the book, This Obsession, psychographed by the medium Francisco Cândido Xavier. In this book, the spirit André Luiz recruits new groups of workers of goodness whose intent is to aid in the readjustment of those no longer in the physical plane. Learn more by purchasing your copy at www.sgny.org.
Nourish Your Soul with Kardec Radio.
Now in English, the book Action and Reaction by the spirit André Luiz, psychographed by Chico Xavier. Buy your copy online or via your ebook reader. Go to www.ediceiofamerica.com today.
Come and enjoy the 5th Spiritist Society of Baltimore Forum entitled Honoring Life, which will take place on February 18th from 6 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. at the Spirit Society of Baltimore headquarters, where topics such as abortion, death penalty, collective karma, and much more will be discussed. For more information, go to www.ssbaltimore.org.
And now we return to our program.
So we are back here with Guy Leon Playfair, and we would really recommend this book, Chico Xavier, Medium of the Century. Often, Guy, people come to us and say, how could I get to know more about Spiritism or André Luiz books or Chico Xavier, and where do I begin, etc. And I would really recommend your book because it gives us very good idea about the goals of Spiritism per se, because as you say, the medium is the message in the second chapter. There we find the understanding on what is the ultimate goal of Spiritism, to really transform lives and, as Kardec says, to transform social life as well. And Chico had a huge impact on not only his city, his family, his city, but Brazil as a whole, and now we can see the waves of his social impact coming to international level. You agree, right?
Yes, absolutely. And also don't forget the extraordinary work that he did towards the end of his life in receiving messages from young people who had been killed in accidents. And I was particularly interested in those because they... I am mainly a psychical researcher. I'm a member of the Society for Psychical Research, and I'm interested in verifying all these phenomena. And the spiritists in Brazil, on the whole, never did very much of that. They tended to regard it all as proved already. And it was not really until Hernani Guimarães Tandrari started his institute in 1961, I think it was, that a group of spiritists began to do proper scientific investigation. And that's good for everybody, because he verified cases of reincarnation and poltergeist, which I helped on some of those.
Mm-hmm.
And after all, Kardec did once say that the spiritism would have to be scientific or it would not survive.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's sometimes forgotten. There is not so much today, but there used to be a tendency in Brazil that any kind of research was either not necessary or else it was some kind of a threat, as if we were out to debunk everything, which we certainly are not. We're out to get at the truth. So, but things are very much better today, and I think a lot of that is due to chiefly to Hernani, and also to Chico for being such a accessible and really public friend to everybody.
I love when you talk about, to give perspective to those who haven't been acquainted with him, like when you talk about the fact that he always acknowledged the spirit in his books, and if he had done differently, like many people, like, they keep it quiet, the true authorship of the book, he would probably had received a lot of awards from the Brazilian Academy of Letters and even others, because when we read books such as the novels by Emmanuel 2,000 years ago and 50 years later, etc., you can tell, like, the literary style, it's so perfect. For example, Paul and Stephen, one of the books that really strikes as a true account and the details and the depth in the 20 chapters of that book. You can tell that literary style is really a masterpiece, right?
Well, there's even a book, isn't there, a kind of a dictionary of terms used in...
Evolution into Worlds.
No, in the Roman ones, Ad Dominus and 50 anos depois, which are full of references to places and people and events. And there is a whole book explaining the history behind them. Mm-hmm. And I think Chico wrote that book in about 6 or 7 months. And if you compare it with the novel Ben-Hur, which was written by American Army General Wallace, he took 7 years, I think, to research it. And Chico just sat down and wrote it in 7 months. I mean, there is an interesting comparison there.
What impressed the most in you regarding the man, Chico Xavier? Because you mentioned he never married, but he never made headlines as well either. I mean, it's amazing, right, in the current world and the controversy about being a spiritist and the first decades of his life and his work.
Well, I think you said it very well. I mean, it was just his absolute, genuine humility and simplicity, honesty. And remember, right back in the 1930s, when he first became famous after the publication of his first book, the Parnassus from Beyond the Grave, the newspaper O Globo in Rio sent one of their reporters to Pedro Leopoldo, where he was then living. Mm-hmm. And the idea was to simply debunk him, finish him off once and for all. So they sent the reporter, Clementino de Alencar, who was a very well-educated man and also a well-behaved one, and he instead got to know Chico very well and spent something like 2 months not debunking him at all, but describing the way he lived and examining his home, looking for any signs of books of research and so on, and he found nothing except a few almanacs and sort of old newspapers and things, but almost no books at all. And he did a lot to establish Chico's reputation as a genuine medium. I think we owe a lot to Clementino for that.
That's impressive. And you also mention here in the book that Chico, he was very aligned in a country that many people refer, besides the people who know of Spiritism, majority of people in the world think of Brazil and samba, soccer, and beautiful women.
Yes, well, it has all those.
Exactly, and it's amazing because Chico Xavier kept himself so true to the discipline message and mentorship of. Does it impress you and other people that you know the fact that he was so balanced, that he kept himself, let's say, pure and did not deviate a second?
Yes, I think he must have felt himself guided by his various guides, chiefly Emmanuel, whom he says that he actually saw when he was visiting the site of his mother's tomb. And Emmanuel was always the kind of chief editor of Chico's books. And then, of course, there was André Louise, who wrote some of the most popular ones, including Nocelar. And I think Chico felt that he just left it to them, and if they wanted to use his hand, that's okay with him.
Mm-hmm. As you yourself, you're a writer, and when you look at Chico Xavier's work, 400 plus books in 75 years of volunteering, work of the heart with the spirit authors, do you think the fact that some of his books were written like in 2 days vouch for some form of evidence that really it didn't come from him?
Well, there have been writers who could write very quickly. I mean, there was a novelist called Barbara Cartland who recently died, and she wrote about 600 novels, which I'm told were really basically all the same and absolutely not rubbish. I mean, no literary value at all. And she did actually write in a sort of trance. Apparently, she would lie down on her sofa after lunch and dictate to the secretary. Mm-hmm. And her books always had exactly the same plot and written in the most awful kind of sugary style. And she could just do it all the time. And there's no sign of any kind of inspiration from anybody except maybe some extremely primitive spirit who really couldn't write. And the contrast with Chico is just enormous. I mean, there have been many examples of the poets and writers who were inspired, including, well, Charles Dickens and Stevenson, for example, and poets such as William Blake, but not to the same, not permanently, like Chico was, if you like, inspired every day, all the time.
Were there particular experiences that you had in your encounters with Chico Xavier that really made an impact in your life?
Well, unfortunately, I only met him once, but he did make a very strong impression. I just had the feeling that I was in the presence of a very good man who did his best to serve humanity and ask for nothing in return. And I say I can't help being deeply impressed by him and wish his spirit every success in the future.
Guy, as you wrote your final chapter about the happy ending, why did you entitle the last chapter Happy Ending? Why do you think the fact that you describe like a happy ending?
goodness, I can't remember. I think it was about wasn't it about all these messages that he got from young people who'd been killed? I think that was a sign that he was doing a very practical work of consoling the parents of these boys who they would give the most extraordinary detailed evidence. They would always come through with the names of every single member of their family, including the dog, I think, sometimes. And
it became a movie. It became a movie named As Mães de Chico Xavier, The Fathers of Chico Xavier, right?
I saw the trailer, yes.
It's an amazing movie. It's really deeply touching.
Well, yes, and of course, Paolo Rossi, the brother of
Dr. Norbury.
My lady, yes. He and Annie also, they tracked down about 30 of these parents and interviewed them and verified that what Chico had written was true, and that they'd had no contact at all with him before. Well, one or two of them had, but not many. And that was an example of the kind of research which I would have done if I'd been there. Mm-hmm. And it completely supported everything which Chico wrote. And Paolo Rossi's book is very important. Mm-hmm. And it's now being translated into English. I'm afraid I can't remember the title in English, but it is incredible, and it's well worth reading.
You're right. That book really is a beautiful reference and the scientific proof as well of the accounts of the messages that were received. By the way, from a more research perspective, that type of mediumship, bringing spontaneous communications from loved ones with so much great detail about their lives, etc., it came in the last third of his life, right?
Yes, it was curious that it only started, I think, about 1980, when he was already more than 70 years old, and he seemed to be able to do it every time. I mean, we have had mediums in England who produced very convincing messages from dead people, but not every day, and not in such enormous detail, and even sometimes describing exactly what happened in the accident and whose fault it was, and which car hit what, and so on. And I just don't know of any similar case anywhere. That kind of accuracy and sheer volume of messages. He did hundreds of them, and apparently could just turn it on like a tap with no effort at all. Really quite extraordinary.
Yeah, and the book you just mentioned, and now as I flip the pages to the back of your book, there you have the quote on Survival Evidence, Life's Triumph by Paolo Rossi Severino.
That's the one, yes, Life's Triumph.
Yeah.
It's a very, very interesting book indeed.
Quoting from your book about the happy ending here, also being a reference to the peculiar day in which he crossed over, which was the day Brazil was truly happy. Right?
Yes, that was a happy ending. He did predict several times that he was going to die on a day when Brazil would be very happy. And the idea that anybody would be happy because Chico had died was very strange. But he did indeed die on the day of the cup final of the football Copa do Mundo, which Brazil won, I think, for the fifth time or something. And, the whole country went completely bananas, as you can imagine. Yeah. And Chico just passed away quietly in the middle of all this celebration. So he, I think that's the way he would have wanted it. There was so much excitement about the football that his passing was hardly noticed, although it certainly was noticed. I mean, his funeral was an incredible affair. He had a message from the president and thousands of people in the streets accompanying the coffin to the cemetery. So he was given a very large public farewell, which I'm sure he would have found very embarrassing, but he deserved it, all of it.
Yeah, Guy, this is very, very interesting. We are now going to give a moment for us to reflect one of the passages of Chico Xavier, as explained by Dr. Marco Magalhães in the segment Spiritism in Your Life. And then we'll be back for more with Guy Leon Playfair.
Hello, dear Kardec Radio listener. Welcome to our segment Spiritism in Your Life. Today that we're being inspired by this extraordinary example of dedication, charity, and love brought to us by the medium Francisco Cândido Xavier, we should also reflect on another very important message that he brought to us, which is the importance of forgiveness in our pathway to progress. Chico Xavier was a very disciplined medium who always followed the teachings brought to us by our Master Jesus and Allan Kardec. And we have to remember that forgiveness is one of the most important virtues highlighted by Jesus. At the time Jesus came, forgiveness was not something common to the society. He brought an ideal completely against the reality of that time that was based on the law of revenge. Some of the most important things that he brought at that time was that, number one, everyone makes mistakes. And Jesus is very clear when he describes to us through many, many passages, showing us that we're all learning. We still make mistakes, and we have to correct them by knowing that we should forgive others. Number two, another important message he brought is that how many times should we forgive? Is it 1, 2, 3, 5? No, we have to forgive always, because forgiveness is part of evolution. And we're only going to be evolved if forgiveness is part of our existence. Number three, who should we forgive? It's very easy to forgive people that we love, that live by us. What about forgiving those who did really bad things against us? What about forgiving our enemies? So Jesus brought another very interesting point, is that we have to forgive everyone, including ourselves. Because sometimes we are so hard on ourselves that we can't forgive our own mistakes. And number four, when should we forgive? We should forgive every time, especially right now. So do not wait a minute to forgive, because you're already late. All the time you keep those feelings of resentment, of guilty, of anger inside you, you're generating energies that can be very, very detrimental, not only to your physical body, but you as a spirit in your eternal existence. In the book Education of Sentiments by Jason de Camargo, which unfortunately is not translated yet to English, he dedicates a whole chapter doing a very nice review on interesting aspects of forgiveness. He concludes that we can free ourselves from the prison of resentment by forgiving. And through that act, we generate feelings of peace, love, and happiness that, based on recent peer-reviewed publications, stimulate the production of endorphins, immunoglobulins, increase self-esteem, and flood ourselves with a good feeling and good energies. On the other hand, by not forgiving, we generate feelings of hate, guilty, fear that will create imbalanced energies that directly affect our physical body and perispiritual body, and will translate into diseases later on. And you might be asking me now, what should I do to put this in practice? And I tell you, the first thing you have to do is to bring forgiveness to your daily life, removing that idea that forgiveness is inaccessible or is just too elevated and it's not for you. Next, always think about others, including your enemies, with love, because the love you're sharing with them will return to you, and it will help you clear up all those feelings that you have against that person. Next, you should pray and meditate. Elevate your thoughts to God, because by doing that, you remove all the energies that are blocking you from fully forgiving another person. And finally, my friends, the most important things of all is that We have to show our love and charity by our acts, not only by our words. So go out there right now, talk to the person you have a problem, forgive them, and do something good for them. Because in that way, you can be sure that you're doing your part towards your progress and for the progress of many others. Thank you all, my friends, and God bless us.
We will return to our program after these messages.
Available for purchase, the book Conception of God by Herculano Pires. In this book, Professor Herculano Pires writes about the impossibility to conceive nothingness and the logic of God's existence. Learn more by purchasing your copy online at www.sgny.org.
Would you like to liberate yourself from your life struggles or to find inner balance? The Inner Journey CD has 3 beautiful visualizations that will help you bring harmony to your life. As Joanna DeAngeli tells us to, live in a way that you leave enlightening footprints in your pathway as if they were stars pointing out the pathway to happiness. To find the CD, go to the bookstore on the Spiritist Society of Baltimore webpage, www.ssbaltimore.org. That is www.ssbaltimore.org, and start your inner journey today.
Nourish Your Soul with Kardec Radio.
Now in English, the book Action and Reaction by the Spirit Andrea Luiz, psychographed by Chico Xavier. Buy your copy online or via your ebook reader. Go to www.ediceiofamerica.com today.
Save the date for the 6th U.S. Spiritist Symposium that will be held at the Rialto Center for the Arts at Georgia State University in Atlanta, Georgia on Saturday, May 12, 2012. This year's topic is Love and Enlightenment, a Pathway to Self-Healing. Come out and enrich your mind, body, and soul. For more info, go to www.spiritistsymposium.org.
And now we return to our program.
Hello, dear Kardec Radio listeners. I am Kirsten DeMello, and this is the Spiritist Moment. Today our reflections will be about none other than Francisco Cândido Xavier. At this point during our program today, you would have learned much about Chico Xavier, as he was most commonly known as. Going to discuss several things, a couple of cases from Chico, and how Kardec also viewed mediumship. And we ask ourselves, why or what made Chico Xavier so popular when we know that there existed many mediums, even till today, who have great mediumship in many different continents, in many different countries? What can we say was so specific and unique to Chico Xavier? Well, one of the perspectives that we can definitely take respectfully is, and as we reflect with Kardec, is the fact that Chico never charged for any of his services. And as a matter of fact, he worked at his professional career during the day, and coming home, he devoted himself to Spiritist work, Spiritist services at his center there in Uberaba, and later at a different location. But let's reflect with Kardec from chapter 26 from the Gospel according to Spiritism, when Kardec talks about, in this chapter that's entitled Give Freely Which You Have Received Freely, talk about mediumship being free of charge in the Spiritist perspective. Kardec also mentions, and I quote, modern mediums, because the disciples also possess mediumship, also have received a free gift from God, that of being the interpreters of spirits for the instruction of humankind, to show them the pathway to the good and to lead them into faith, and not to sell them words that do not belong to them, because they are not the product of their personal conception, research, or personal labor. God wills for the light to reach everybody. God does not will for the poorest person to be disinherited from it, or to be kept from it by saying, I don't have faith because I could not pay for it, or I could not have the consolation of receiving the encouragement and the displays of affection of those whom I weep for because I am poor. So we reflect. What if Chico had charged? What if all those hundreds of thousands of people who received psychographed messages never got a chance to be consoled, never got a chance to dry their teary eyes? But quite the opposite happened. Hundreds of thousands of people were consoled, were helped, and were assisted, either by words or through his mediumship. They are blessed for sure. And a couple of cases here we want to share with you, dear friends, that have definitely touched our hearts. And as there are hundreds of cases, and due to time constraints, we are unable to discuss all of them, although they are truly amazing and inspiring for each one of us. But a couple of them we would like to share with you. One in particular, and it is entitled The Unforgettable Question. It's from the book Beautiful Cases of Chico Xavier. And at one particular time, Chico was under, we could say, some criticism by harsh critics. And he was very upset about these criticism he was receiving, so much so that he became so perturbed. And finally, Emmanuel appeared to him, and he had asked him what had happened. And then Chico began describing to him what had happened. And basically, in the end of this little anecdote, the little story, Emmanuel turned to him and said, well, Chico, listen, if Jesus, who was Jesus, died on that cross and didn't have anything great or anything great happen to him at that moment, yet you who are Chico, you expect that, great big carriage comes and saves you and takes you all around this great earth. And after that, Chico reflected and immediately was changed. So what can we learn about this case, dear friends, that you can go and read for yourself in the book, because we are just paraphrasing here to get to the point. The point being, if Christ Jesus walked this earth, and he was in such circumstances where the disciples were not perfect, the ambiance was less than perfect, much more serious conditions that the earth is in now in terms of moral imperfections, how much more are we deserving to have circumstances that are more benefiting, making things easier for us? No, if Jesus himself did not receive it, are we more deserving to have more favorable circumstances? And so that is part of the lesson that Emmanuel and we also choose, dear friends, to share with you, to reflect about. How many times do we complain that, well, perhaps our spiritist friends and workers at our own centers sometimes are, perhaps in our own perspectives, are not up to par, perhaps are imperfect. But we also should reflect with Emmanuel and perfect model and guide, Christ Jesus, that he did not live amongst perfect conditions. He did not have perfect disciples. We know in many stories they were not at all perfect disciples. Another really interesting case we want to share with you, dear friends, dear listeners, is a case that occurred, as they say, from the same book, in the year 1932, when Chico Xavier's first center in Uberaba had very few members at that time, and the very few that they had dwindled down to just Chico. And at which time Chico became very discouraged, as we can imagine. He was human. He became very discouraged, and he thought, well, perhaps I'm going to close the center. There's nobody here. There's just me. And finally, Emmanuel appears to him and says, Chico, what about us? What about us disincarnates who need to hear the blessing of the word and consoling words about Jesus, about love, about spiritism, about this consoling teachings? What about us? And he told Chico, you're not going to stop or close the center. You are going to continue to study at the same time, no matter what, because there's spirits who come here to receive blessing, to receive healing. You serve a great purpose. So Chico decided to keep going. And from the year 1932, between the year 1932 and 1934, Chico continued this way, just by himself. And this is a serious, very serious model for us, because how many times, as to be expected, sometimes the amount of people that come to our center are a lot, and sometimes it's very little. Sometimes we get our minds confused with this idea of having mega spiritist centers. As we previously stated, Chico never charged anything, and of all the thousands of hundreds of people who came to see him, if he had charged, well, for sure he could have built a mega spiritist center. But he did not. Every penny from every book he sold and money he received went right back out into the people who were needy, in the society where he lived in the area where he lived in, wherever he could serve as useful, he did. He gave it right back. No money did he keep for himself. All that he used from his blessing of mediumship was given back. So these are some thoughts we want to reflect with, for sure. And one last case, friends, we want to share with you. And it's entitled in the same book. It's called A Lesson on Faith. A very interesting case about a man who came from a different city to come and visit Chico. He came to visit Chico, but on that particular day, Chico had been very busy. He had been tied up at work, and this man had traveled very far and spent a lot of his own money to come see Chico. And he was very upset with Chico, and he even said, "Oh, I doubt his mediumship. Can you imagine? I sacrificed all my time and money to come to this town, and just like that, he wasn't even here. Oh, I lost my faith because of him. Everything is just a fraud." And he said, "I'm convinced that Chico is just deceiving people." Well, with that, he left, and he spoke ill of him in a different town. And finally, a friend of Chico said, "Chico, maybe you should, talk to this person, see what's up, what's going on." So Chico, of course, consulted Emmanuel. And interesting enough, what did Emmanuel say to him? He said, "Chico, let this case go. Let it go. Because if this man has built his faith upon you, then, it's not a good idea. If for this much he let go of his faith, and his faith wasn't strong." Now, what can we learn from this? Why would Emmanuel say that when so many times Emmanuel doesn't speak like this? Emmanuel goes and tells Chico to make amends with other people. But in this case, he doesn't. Why? Because people who don't have true faith that has roots in their own understanding and not based upon a person or circumstance, well, his faith is bound to fall at some point. If it's not because of Chico, it will be because of something else. So he said, let him go, because each one of us has to learn that faith must be constructed in Jesus, because only Jesus, and trusting him and imitating his examples, can we reach God. We think about these cases and how they truly pertain to our own lives and how we can serve better at our own spiritist centers or in our day-to-day lives. Why do we reflect with Chico? These cases are so dear to our hearts. Why? Because they're simple, yet they're so profound. We see the humility and the faith he maintained. Although we also see he was very much human. He suffered through criticisms of other people. He suffered through many different things in his own personal life and his family, but he always remained steady, even when no one came to the Spiritist Center, when he was by himself, although we know that truly he was never by himself, as neither one of us are ever by ourselves. Our spirit guardian angels are always with us, as long as we continue on a positive path and on our lives, constantly seeking inner transformations, utilizing these stories and much more, the codification of Kardec, to inspire us. Because why are stories inspiring? Why did Jesus himself share parables? Stories are things that we remember. It's almost as if more connections are made in our brain for our own memory purposes, for us to recall these cases in our day-to-day lives and be able to apply them, because we connect more with real life stories. So we ask that you remember these stories, although again we simply paraphrase them. You can go and read these in the book yourself or read other cases, but these are the truly inspiring examples that Francisco Cândido Xavier left for us, and we share with you, dear friends. And as always, we recommend you go and do your own personal study in the codification by Allan Kardec and the Good and Benevolent Spirits, as well as the vast array of books by Chico Xavier and many other Spiritist authors. And as always, dear listeners, we wish you many blessings.
Yeah, dear listener, we are in the last few minutes of the show today about Chico Xavier, the Medium of the Century, which is actually a book by the renowned Guy Leon Playfair, who is still here with us. And he wrote this book in gratitude for this legacy that was left by Chico Xavier. And in the book, he tells the story of how a poorly educated man from a very modest background rose to become a national hero while refusing any payment other than the wages he earned as a government employee. Guy Leon Playfair also discusses Chico's phenomenal literary output of more than 400 books and the countless messages he received that provide some of the most compelling evidence yet recorded for survival of death. Now let us continue this conversation with our guest, Guy Leon Playfair. We have two more questions here that we actually received from the listeners of Kardec Radio. One of them is about the fact that you had a collaboration with the amazing Hernani Guimarães Andrade, who was an engineer and also a Spiritist scholar in Brazil, to say the least. He was truly admired by Chico Xavier. Can you tell us a little bit about your collaboration with him?
Well, yes, I was introduced to Hernani by a friend of mine in Rio de Janeiro, where I used to live, a man named Pedro McGregor, who actually wrote the first book in English about Brazilian Spiritism, which came out in the early 1970s, before mine. And Pedro just told me one day that there was somebody in São Paulo called Hernani Andrade who was doing scientific research. He didn't have an address for him, and of course there was no email in those days, and Andrade is quite a common name. So I just happened to be in a bookstore in Rio and found a book with his name on the back cover as a little quotation from the writer. So I thought, well, at least this publisher must know where he is. So I simply jumped on the bus and traveled to Sao Paulo, went to this publishing house and said, excuse me, I'd like to contact Mr. Andrade. And a very helpful man said, yes, sure, and then made a phone call, and Hernani said, come on round, and so I came on round, and on the same day I decided to move to Sao Paulo and work with him. It was very, very quick. It was, I felt really that something was organized for my benefit. It was an extraordinary day, and I'm very glad I did it. Because leaving Rio to live in Sao Paulo is not something that many people would consider normal. But, well, I mean, Rio is a very beautiful place and very, very sort of lively and nice beach and so on. Sao Paulo is an industrial giant and no beach, but there were things rather more important than beaches, and I never went back to Rio, and I'm glad I stayed because Hernani taught me everything I know about how to do proper research, and he really was an outstanding researcher, certainly the best from Brazil, and he's now becoming better known thanks to translations of his books, which Elsa Rossi has managed to publish in English, and I helped with the translation of some of them, and he always had very friendly relations with Chico, and I know they met a number of times, especially on that incredible TV show, the Pinga Fogo, where Chico was on something like 3 hours, I think, of live television.
So you were in Brazil at the time that Pinga Fogo happened in 1971?
No, unfortunately, I just left because I used to actually live in the same street as the TV 2P studio where it took place. So I was about 100 meters away. Wow. Very sad. I mean, if only I'd been there, I just would have walked around the corner and turned up. But no, I missed that. But I saw it on tape, of course. So I managed to catch up with it.
Do you plan on writing more books about icons of Spiritism As you just said about the Roundtable Publishing with Elsa Rossi, how much you've been collaborating, and we have been announcing at Kardec Radio some of the books that already came about and the beautiful efforts of Elsa Rossi and you and other collaborators there. But do you plan on writing more about something tangent to it?
Well, I never really know what I'm going to do until I'm doing it. But I can just remind you of the books that we have already done. I mean, the first one was a full-length book which Hernani wrote about a single case of memories of a previous life, which was called Renacer pour Amour, Reborn for Love, which was partly written by the woman herself, describing how one of her sons appeared to be the reincarnation of a Catholic priest, which is rather unusual, because Catholics are not supposed to reincarnate, I'm sure. But this was very, very well written. The woman was a professional writer. And Hernani drove all the way to Minas Gerais, about 500 miles, when he was nearly 80 years old, and did his usual very, very careful study of this case. And so I translated that one, and that's published. And then I edited another collection called Science and Spirit, which I chose 3 of his best cases and edited the translations, and also translated one myself, the Poltergeist from Susano, which was particularly interesting because the local police were involved, and they witnessed the events firsthand, and I went to interrogate them, which was unusual. Police are not used to being interrogated, but I did. And then I also described the case of Rutenberg Roche, which was a really quite extraordinary example of what we call drop-in, spirit entity who just appears unannounced as a private session with a very unusual name, Rutenberg. It's probably the only one in Brazil. And it turned out to be absolutely true. Everything he said, he was a soldier. He said he'd been wounded in the 1930 revolution in São Paulo, the one that brought Getúlio Vargas to power. And he gave the name of his unit and said where he was. He didn't say he was dead. He said he was sort of wounded and confused. And Hernani and his colleagues went through the records, which luckily had been kept, and they found everything was absolutely true. And then there was a soldier named Rutenberg Roche who had been shot in a battle near the town of Buri in São Paulo, and all the names of the officers and so on were absolutely as he'd said. So that's sort of an outstanding case, and I was glad to get those published to show just how thoroughly the institute that Hernani founded used to do its research.
I would like to extend you an invitation for in the near future, hopefully in this year, if you are available, we could bring you back and know more about your collaboration with Dr. Hernani Guimarães Andrade, because he was a true scholar, admired by Chico Xavier, and also left a legacy in terms of research of the afterlife. He also had a collaboration with the renowned Dr. Stevenson from the University of Virginia, who was a Canadian living in the United States, and people barely know, nowadays, or they recall that much. So would you be willing to come back and tell us a little bit more?
Well, yes, I'd be happy to discuss the cases that I worked on while I was in São Paulo. We had chiefly poltergeists. They seem to be happening all over the place, and I found them extremely interesting. And yes, by all means.
That's great.
Like.
Oh, we really appreciate it. So would you please send to the listeners your final comments for the show for today?
Well, I'm very glad to have had the chance of paying tribute to Chico Xavier, because he really was, as I said, the medium of the century, and I think probably the medium of all centuries. So I'm very happy to have a little memorial tribute published to him. And I hope it's read as widely as possible. And I should add that I'm not receiving any payment for it myself. I don't think that would be appropriate in the case of Chico. So all the proceeds will go to a spiritist cause here in England.
That's amazing. That's really amazing. We are truly thankful to your availability and coming here at Kardec Radio and talking to us and sharing this beautiful message. And we would truly recommend your book as a reference for non-spiritists and spiritists because it gives us fact perspective about the legacy and what Spiritism is all about, the proposal, which is beyond an encapsulated religion. It's about life. So thank you so much for being with us, and we hope to have you back in the very near future to talk more about your experiences in collaboration with in the research with Dr. Andrade.
Well, thank you. It was a pleasure.
Dear listener, we are truly happy that today we are inspired by the legacy of Chico Xavier. God bless his heart. We know he is living and very likely living in a very busy, loving way. If he was always constantly concerned about the needs of others, imagine now. Free from the impediments of the heavy body of an incarnated life. We are very grateful to Chico Xavier, and let us remember that the good spirits in Kardec's time said to us in the prolegomena of the Spirit's book, remember that good spirits only aid those who serve with humility and lack of self-interest. They repudiate anyone who uses the way of heaven as a stepping stone to worldly things, and they withdraw from the proud and ambitious. Pride and ambition will always be barriers between human beings and God. They are a veil thrown over the celestial splendors, and God cannot use the blind to explain the light. This is Chico Xavier. In his humility, in his lack of earthly ambitions, he actually conquered a lot of goodness, not only for him, but for millions and millions of people. And his message is coming out to other places of the earth. His movie, Astral City, is already in the United States through Strand Releasing. And also just got to know through Wagner Sees Today that the movie is also being distributed in Canada and hopefully very soon in England and other countries as well. Dear listener, remember, you can always log on to kardecradio.com to get to know more about the programs that are coming up. In a week, we're going to be here live with the amazing Dr. Raymond Moody Jr. You remember him from the Near-Death Experience book. And now he's coming back to talk about one of his other expertise in life. He's not only a medical doctor, he's also a PhD in philosophy. And he became an expert in studying Plato, the philosopher. And Plato had also great spiritual ideas. In the Gospel According to Spiritism, Allan Kardec, in the introduction, talks about Plato and Socrates as the forerunner of the Christ and also the Christian ideas and also the Spiritist ideas. Come here in a week, and we're going to hear directly from a scholar on Plato to get to know more about the spiritual ideas of Plato, and then be inspired as well. Did you know that Divaldo Franco is coming to visit the United States again? Well, next week we're going to divulge the list of places where he is going to be. We know that on February 4th he's going to be in Miami for a big event, and we know March 4th and March 9th he's going to be in Maryland to talk about a most important topic, planetary transition. Come back in a week and we'll tell you much more about this, Plato, and the beautiful ideas that Spiritism brings to us and can only nourish your soul. We thank you all, dear listeners, and especially to those who have been sending us beautiful, encouraging emails at kardecradio@gmail.com. So We bless you all. Get inspired. The life that Chico Xavier lived can also be lived by all of us. It's a matter of willpower, focus, and God-centered life. May God bless us all.
Thank you for listening to Kardec Radio, broadcasting live every Saturday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Email us and share your comments at www.kardecradio.com. Until next time, we wish you many blessings.